I think we can all agree that a cool nickname can make a big difference. I mean, just try to imagine a world where Frank Sinatra wasn't the chairman of the board, Michael Jackson wasn't the king of pop, and Andre the Giant didn't own the distinction of being the 8th wonder of the world. But what if you're saddled with a really lame nickname? Well, that's the problem that Cal, the low G man, knows all too well. To celebrate his 30th anniversary, we're gonna look beyond his silly nickname and find the man at the center of this 8-bit classic. Turn back now if you don't want to know what happens next, because today we're gonna spoil the story and endings of Low G Man, the low gravity man on the Nintendo Entertainment System. This is Game Over, the early years. It's the 23rd century, and the human race has a problem on their hands. In order to colonize the galaxy, they've relied on robots to do the work they can't. In fact, there's so many robots needed that entire planets have been set up for the sole purpose of making new ones. But that turns out to be a big mistake, because aliens invade these planets and turn our robots against us. Their new mission is to stop humanity from colonizing the galaxy, even if that means killing trillions of people along the way. It's up to an elite countries of United Earth soldier known as Low G Man to use his gravity-defying backpack to defeat both the aliens and the robots, saving the human race from certain annihilation. Now, in case you're wondering why they're not sending an entire army to deal with this threat, it's because they already tried that. Yeah, everybody died. The Low G Man is our last hope, and there's reason to be concerned. For one thing, the only superpower he has is to jump really high in the air. He doesn't even fly or shoot rockets or anything, he just jumps really high. He's also not packing much in the form of weaponry. He sports a freeze-ray gun that doesn't do any damage to the foes, so he has to get up there close and then stab them a bunch of times with his spear. That means he's always packing at least 2 weapons, which I gotta say isn't very efficient. You would think that a species that has mastered the technology of colonizing the galaxy would be able to come up with a more effective gun. I mean, that really should be the one thing we're good at, right? Anyway, the Low G Man is forced to go from building to building, exterminating the robots, which ultimately leads to this massive fight against this big guy named Metalhead. This leads to a path through the snowy mountaintops, followed by a frigid dip in the icy waters. It's here where we meet up with Spyron, a serpent robot looking over the water junk pile. He's the only thing standing between us and an enemy-filled submarine that is gonna take us to the caves. Look, there really isn't a whole lot of story to talk about in these levels. Low G Man pretty much goes from one isolated part of the world to another, all while destroying robots. It's always caves and mountains, not big cities or, places with people in jeopardy. His plan seems to be to take the long way to the robot's mothership, where he hopes to kill the main alien and somehow stop the robot invasion. Yeah, that's one of those tropes you see a lot in science fiction, but there's nothing in the instruction manual about the robots having a hive mind. If they've all been reprogrammed to kill humans, then we're gonna need to either rewrite their software or literally kill them. Sure, do it this way. I guess it's probably more dramatic. Anyway, while I complained about the sci-fi cliches, our hero has slowly fought his way into this strange-looking mothership. It's the kind of enemy ship that looks like it was created out of a massive alien. I walk by bones and rib cages. It's pretty gross. The path ultimately leads you to this guard who looks a lot more like a Castlevania boss than a robot. Also, are those xenomorph statues behind the Low G Man? Wait, is this part of the Alienverse? There's no time to dig into that right now because there's this big alien blob thing to defeat. I'm not actually sure what this is supposed to be. Is it a brain, 2 faces smooshed together, or something else? It's kind of like the Rorschach test of bosses. Either way, we shoot it, bomb it, and stab it with our spear until it dies. Now, before we get to that, it's worth mentioning that Low G-Man has 3 slightly different endings. I'm just gonna run the final true ending right now, and then we'll talk about the other 2 endings on the flip side. We beat the boss, and here's what happens next. So like I mentioned a moment ago, Low G-Man has 3 endings. You see, there are technically 3 different loops to play, each with their own slightly different conclusion. For example, the first time we play the game, we're told that there's more left to do, and the game has only just begun. Also, this is where we find out that our hero's name is Cal, just in case you cared. The second quest recycles the same images, while simultaneously making note that the game needs to be beat one more time. It asks right at the end, are you up for the final test? And of course we are. I mean, we've come this far, right? The truth is, there are actually a number of reasons why I wanted to highlight Low G-Man, and none of them have anything to do with the 3 slightly different endings. This isn't what I would call a top-tier ending, but it's satisfying enough, I guess. It's nice that it has a clear vision for the ending, even if it's painfully vague on details. But what I find odd is that the ending doesn't just conclude the story, but also points you to hidden levels throughout the game. You don't see that kind of thing very often. It would be like Contra ending with them talking about the Konami code. Also, speaking of weird meta things, did you notice that the game concludes by talking about G.I. Joe? If you think you're good, just wait for G.I. Joe. This is a not so subtle advertisement for Taxan's next game. which was released only 4 months after Low G-Man. These days, we would probably look at this as confirmation that the two games share the same universe. But back then, it's really just blatant product placement. And I don't know about you, but it kind of feels like cheating. Did the developers really have so little to say about Low G-Man that they couldn't even write a closing sentence for the game? I mean, you beat the game 3 different times and all you get is this commercial for G.I. Joe? The instruction manual sets up robot planets and cities completely wiped out by the alien invasion. But all that apparently is thrown out the window in favor of marketing. Whoever came up with this idea should have been fired. And you actually know what? They probably were fired because Taxon went out of business less than a year after this game came out. Oof. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Game Over, the early years. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes every week. Now here's the question I have for you. What are the best and worst video game nicknames? Oh man, I can't wait to see what you come up with in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back tomorrow with a review of Rise of Insanity on the Switch, followed by the new shoot-'em-up Galaxy Warfighter. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.